You are listening to Cemetery Confessions, the world's #1 goth talk podcast.
All right, hello and welcome back to Cemetery Confessions. This month we are exploring the relationship between the Gothic and goth, from runway fashion to mysticism, literature, philosophy, and more. We'll be discussing how we determine where goth ends and the Gothic begins, and what practical effect we see on street fashion and Gothic bodies at club events. We're also going to be reviewing the newest album from the band Annex, give our Sinister Suggestions, cover listener feedback, and a lot more on this episode of Cemetery Confessions. So as always, I am the Count, and Mark is not here this month, but I am here with very special guest, well-known blogger, amino mod, and polar bear tamer, Caroline Carnivorous. Welcome to the show.
Hey! Such an honor to be here.
Thanks for hanging out. And inside joke for anyone not on the Discord, probably not a good way to start the show, but I thought you would appreciate that.
Oh my god. Okay. I guess we have to go a little back. I guess it all started because of my mother. She loves horror movies and books, so I was kind of spoon-fed with all of that from a very young age. I'm surprised I didn't have nightmares, because my younger sister did. I loved it. I also loved the Norwegian comic strip Nemi. I don't know if people know about that. I guess it's gotten a little bit internationally known by now. It's this goth metalhead chick.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yep.
Yeah, that's Norwegian, so I think I liked it before I could even read, and definitely before I could understand the jokes. And also the show The Tribe, which I realized I was watching that before I started school, and I loved two characters called Ebony and Lex, and they wore like tons of eyeliner and leather pants and shit.
Nice.
So I later realized that probably influenced me. And then in school, I was pretty much just the nerd and the teacher's pet. And then at the end of elementary school, which would be age 12 here, I started getting into more alternative music, but that was kind of still mainstream.
Yeah.
And then it just got darker and darker over the next few years. And I wasn't quite aware of goth or goth culture yet at the time. It wasn't until bands like Nine Inch Nails and Typo Negative I kind of found the stuff. But it wasn't like an epiphany or anything. It was just a natural progression through different alternative music and styles. And then I kind of found myself at around 17. But I guess the big, hallelujah moment was my first VGT, Wave Gothic Treffen. And that kind of happened by chance.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I had some friends that live here in Norway, but they come from Leipzig. And they invited me and a friend to go. And I had kind of heard of the festival, vaguely, but I was thinking of it as, like a faraway dream.
Yeah.
And then he was like, "Wanna go?" And I was like, "Shit, oh my god, yes!" And it was like finally coming home. It was incredibly amazing for me.
Yeah, that's one hell of a first festival, I have to say.
Yeah.
That will kind of ruin you for all other festivals, I would think.
Yeah, I still haven't checked out other goth festivals.
Okay, yeah. Why would you need
to? Yeah, exactly. But I'm hoping to check some out this year, maybe, if we can do it. But it will probably be really tiny in comparison.
Yeah.
Because VGT is a city full of people just like us. It's like at least 20,000 visitors. I think the year there was an anniversary, there was like 30,000.
That's amazing.
So the city was fucking packed.
So
and
go ahead, sorry.
Yeah. No, everyone is super friendly, and I just love the fact that people come from different corners of the world, but we have fun in the exact same way.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating. So yeah, I'm going to my 6th one next month, so I'm really excited. But yeah, I can't imagine my life without Vegete.
That is one of the interesting things, is that, certainly there are regional differences with what kind of music goths will listen to, or the way the local community operates. But in a large degree, the people I've talked to from all over the world on this show, there's far more in common than there is different, and from like countries that have absolutely no similarities in any way. It's really pretty striking that we all share such a similar cultural like value system, I guess.
Yeah, it's amazing.
But I was going to ask, what's the scene like in Norway for goth? I would imagine it's one of those similar to the smaller communities where it's kind of like all subcultures hang out together kind of thing. Is that what it's?
Kind of, yeah. The goth scene in particular is pretty much dead.
Right.
Most of the clubs, they closed in like the early 2000s, so
Okay.
I'm too young to have experienced that. There's still some stuff happening on a monthly basis, I think, in Oslo, the capital, but that's still pretty far away from me, so I haven't been yet. There's one club reopening in the south of the country this summer, so I'm hoping to go to that. But other than that, it's mostly metal-based, particularly black metal. And I'm into that too. And I guess there are people that are similar to me that, go to metal events because they like metal, but then they also like other subcultural stuff, but there's nothing else to go to. Like last weekend, I went to this doom rock metal thing, or kind of 70s psychedelic rock event. It's not really my thing, but it was still, all the people with long hair come together. It was still fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to think. New Zealand, Puerto Rico, and someone from Lithuania, and it seems like most of those smaller places, they have a metal scene, and then anyone who isn't, whether you're like punk or goth or whatever it is, you all just kind of go to the metal bars and clubs, and everybody goes to the same thing because there's not enough people for it to be split up into all those different scenes.
Yeah, we mostly have metal rock clubs or bars here. It's mostly a pub culture here, not much dancing.
Well, I'm fine with that. I'm not a big dancer. I just like to drink more than I should. So it sounds good to me.
I only dance goth. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could see myself walking out of my snow-covered house, hopping on a wyvern, with my blood tainted fur coat, like all Norwegians do, and flying off to the metal pub.
Yeah, that's exactly what we do.
And then Caroline, where can we tell us where your blog is, and where, if you want to share your Facebook? Or let people know.
My blog is carolinesometimes.blogspot.whatever thing. For me, it's .no, but you can use .com or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. I also have a Facebook page for that with the same name, Caroline Sometimes. Other than that, I use Caroline Carnivorous on Instagram, on Amino. I'm a leader on the Gothic and Trad Goth Amino.
Oh, there's a Trad Goth Amino?
Yep.
I missed that. I'm going to look it up right now.
It's a very small community. I think we're less than 1,000 people. And
oh, that's still quite a lot, though.
Say it's kind of better than Gothic in my opinion, because it's more music focused, whereas the Gothic one is just a lot of people.
I get as a user. For me, I like Gothic Amino because it's not as curated, so I can see what people are actually doing and get more of a feel of like, okay, this is what the larger online community of people that say they're goth are doing right now.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't have an invitation code for Trad Goth. What do I do? Request to join?
Oh yeah, if you just write something and we'll accept you. For anyone listening, you can just type Cemetery Confessions in the join request and we'll just accept you. Because we think you're cool.
I'm typing in all caps. This is the count of Cemetery Confessions. Let me in.
I can probably just accept
I don't know who's going to get that, but they might just ban me for being a dick. So we'll see.
I'll just accept you right away.
Okay. Like, who's this pretentious piece of shit? We had this whole joke about on the last Gothquisition episode about how we could go to any club and people would just know us because they had our posters on the wall.
Oh yeah.
And then Juz was like, well, they'd probably just ban us and then we'd have to stand outside and yell about how we were better than them the whole time. Which I feel like is how my life goes sometimes. All right. So
that's what we've done with Amino now.
Yeah.
We've closed it. It was mostly because there were a lot of creeps. Even
you don't
leaders.
want it to become vampire freaks.
Yeah, no, because even as leaders, we're getting people, like several people a day, being like, show us your tits.
Oh, God.
Stuff like that. And literally, when we changed it to request to join or whatever, the first fucking dude was someone who's like, I want a big titty goth GF or something like that. Yeah.
If you want, I can take a picture of my tits and you can use that as a default like reply.
Yes.
That's terrible. That's unfortunate. But that is kind of like every time I try to go back to Vampire Freaks, it is a lot of very young emo girls and then a lot of very old men trying to get with underage girls, and it's I technically still have my account.
Yeah, I do. And then I check like every few months.
Yeah.
And then I just get tons of messages and picture comments and stuff. And I'm just like, nope, I'm out. No, forget it.
All right. So, well, I guess we'll go ahead and jump into the news.
If this boy did this and the Gothic, stuff that went around it and the motive and everything, don't we all sort of want to know, that could be our teenager, that could be our kid doing that. How could that possibly happen?
Being described as being involved with the goth movement, but what exactly is that? We kind of know it when we see it, but some aspects of a goth lifestyle could they provoke such a murder?
So this month we're talking about this article. Well, the article's titled Dark Arts, a look at fashion's current obsession with the new breed of Gothicism. But we're going to cover a lot of ground, and it's going to relate mostly to fashion. Yeah, let's jump right in. Want a quick path to perplexity? Try to untangle what Gothic is. I'm not a goth was a catch cry for young men and women in underground clubs or emerging from the solitude of their bedrooms in all black from their boots to their Susie Sue plume of ebony hair. It's only people that aren't goth that think The Cure are a goth band, lead singer Robert Smith told reporters, seemingly even more curiously. Were the morose mobs skulking gloomily around the streets, refusing to join in rampant consumerism of the 1980s a kind of fashion fiction? Given it's making its overtones known again this season, surely not. To me, this is going to come up later in the article, but that sentence kind of sounds like they're saying, hey, remember that fashion that refused to join rampant consumerism? Let's turn it into rampant consumerism.
Yeah.
Which is but we'll get into that. We're going to get into this I want to read a little bit more of this introduction here, though. So they say, what is the idea of Gothicism? Is it the heavy use of black decorated lace layers? Asks Helen Sack, who forensically monitors the comings and goings on runways. I think the idea of goth has become an easy label, ubiquitous with anything that looks a bit dark and subversive. Look a bit deeper, though, and it is always more than that. All right, so here's my first question for you then. Kind of leveraging your experience on Gothic Amino and, other places online. And in person as well, I guess. But from that experience, which of those directions do you see the culture going in? Is it becoming more a goth is simply something that looks a bit dark and weird, or is there still that the look is just a reflection of something deeper than that?
I kind of immediately want to say it's just a fashion nowadays. That is what I see the most. People see the fashion and they just immediately want to copy it.
Right.
And especially with those goth stereotype drawings by Megan Ballon.
Oh yeah, God, yeah.
Yeah, because they see these
Mm-hmm.
and they think they have to pick one and stay that way.
Everyone's forgotten that it started as a joke.
Yeah, that's what I constantly tell them. But no,
Like you don't. What is it? ATEC always says, if you don't get the joke, you are the joke.
Yes. Yes. But yeah, those drawings have been around for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
It's more than 10 years, I think, but it isn't until now people actually take them seriously.
Yeah.
So we've gotten very far from, I guess, what goth is. It's
it is hard.
Shallow.
It is hard to I guess you kind of have to take it group by group too, because it depends. Especially if you're online, it's difficult to tell who is actually part of the subculture and who just thinks they're a bit spooky and they're gonna change in a year.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of have to divide that up depending on what you're looking at. It's really hard to. It's pretty easy to say, oh, goth is only, kids these days only care about looking weird. But it is hard to tell because you kind of have to take it. It's kind of situational, I guess.
Yeah. But that's at least what I mostly see on Amino, and in some Facebook groups, the bigger ones probably.
The bigger ones.
Some people are, the typical that I met in high school that thinks goth is about liking metal and being violent and super tough and I'll kick your fucking ass if you make me mad because I'm so tough. Yeah. I've seen a few of those.
I thankfully haven't run into any of them. That's concerning.
You're lucky.
Yeah. All right, so moving on. They say, spool forward to fashion at this moment. Clock the body-swallowing proportions at Balenciaga? I don't know. I'm bad at...
I think so.
The explosion of sequins at Gucci, the fashion feathers at Prada. But wait, what's that? At Alexander McQueen, a symbol of Cornish witchcraft sewn in among sequins on a gown. Oh my God, McQueen's turning into Killstar now. Look quickly to Gucci, a bat winging its way across an intarsia knit.
What?
I'm bad at fashion.
I have no idea.
At new label Alex, leather strapping and chains slung from belt loops and harnesses sat over slip dresses. So, what's your kind of a view on goth fashion on the runway? Do you just make a distinction between stuff you would see in kind of bigger stores and runway fashion? Is it more okay on the runway, or?
I think I would say so, because now I'm not a big fashion person, really.
Yeah, neither am I.
I think those fashion show things, aren't they supposed to be like clothes you can never wear?
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like it.
Yeah, so I don't really mind if they do this every few years, something that's like kind of gothic. So I don't really
Yeah.
mind that.
So
But I guess that influences the more mainstream clothing brands. And that could be positive or negative. I choose to take it positively, and I just wait for sales so I can get some cool looking stuff at a nearby store for really cheap, and even later at thrift stores. So
yeah, that's where I was gonna go next, because it's, my understanding is basically that the stuff on the runway, or at least the themes of it, is what trickles down to the bigger stores, and then so you'll see more people wearing black or more people wearing skull print or something like that. And I guess in the past it didn't really concern me, because I took kind of the same view of what you just said. It's easier to find clothing. We can get cheap black clothes and modify it for our purposes. But now, I don't know. The last year or so, I've become a bit more pessimistic about it. If only because, well, I guess there's two reasons. The first is that it confuses that semiotic signaling, which basically means like and I've run into this more and more as I'll go to a store, or I'll go to the mall, or I'll go to a restaurant, and I'll see these people that I previously would have thought, oh, that's a goth who's just wearing casual clothing. But then if I go talk to them, they look at me like I'm from another planet.
oh yeah.
Which is really, really frustrating. And then my other concern is that this may have influenced or fueled the kind of Tumblr goth trend, and the all those different sub fashions that kind of got conflated with goth. And now it seems like now even some people are just accepting those as a part of goth, which is also concerning. So
Yeah.
which it's I guess that's another thing, like with the thing you brought up, those fashion subgroups that the artist drew. Like the farther you get away from it, the newer people are going to start taking it seriously. Like, I don't know if you've seen this, but Marilyn Manson is like a goth musician now for younger people.
Yeah.
Which just blows my mind.
Like, it's like what normies, for the lack of a better term, used to think about us is now what people who call themselves goth think about goth.
Right. Yeah. For me, it's really romantic, says Kathleen, who is a women's wear buyer at Australian luxury boutique Harold's, of Gothic motifs like skulls, hearts, and daggers. It's similar to why we like going on scary rides or watching horror movies. It's that idea of being pushed into something exhilarating. It's fashion. In fashion, it's the same. Take Melbourne jeweler Emma Abrams, whose label Heart of Bone has produced an exclusive collaboration with Harold's, where clients can have pieces custom engraved. Quote, we imagined lovers carving each other's initials into trees. No, not trees. Tresser school desks with knives, getting heart tattoos, and sending each other roses. I think that's kind of the thing I see with mainstream clothing. Same idea. You take these goth signifiers and aesthetics, and then mix them together with non-goth stuff, and then people say, "Oh, it's a bit spooky, so that means it's goth."
Well, okay. Gothic motifs like skulls, hearts, and daggers.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty bad.
And carving your initials into your school dress. Heart tattoos, sending each other roses. Okay, maybe. Jesus, that's pretty thin.
That's that's like a normal thing to do, though.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you think that this kind of saying that kind of stuff and these kind of trends contributes to the idea that I see people complaining about a lot, that people think goth is just a fashion sense and everything else like music and literature and all that is just kind of extra.
Yeah, it probably does. Now, I have no idea who these people are and what influence they have, but I assume they do, since this is an article from Vogue.
Yeah, that's a good point too, because these are probably well known. Well, I mean, I assume within certain fashion circles, but it's also like there's that thing of people out that are clearly outside of their understanding of what the culture is, trying to talk about what the culture is, which is frustrating.
Yeah.
So what's exciting now is maintaining a veneer of seeming sweetness while hinting at a darker side. It is Emily Brandt's Catherine hiding a wild passion for an ill-matched man, wandering romance-stricken in a cotton nightdress, Victorian Gothic writings with overtures of the supernatural and elements of antiquity hinted at another time, the thinking being that with the exploration of the world, less was left to the imagination. That kind of illustrates my issue with the book Post-Millennial Gothic that we did an episode on, because it takes this tact of looking at goth through either a mainstream lens or in this case through a Gothic literature lens. And I think if you do that, either of those, it misses out on what goth really is, because goth culture takes inspiration from both of those, but it's not really meant to be understood through the framework of those cultures either.
Yeah, that's why I don't really understand this article. Are they talking about goth or are they talking about Gothic?
Yeah. So let's get into that a little bit. I mentioned that book, Post-Millennial Gothic. That was by Catherine Spooner. But in previous books, she identifies the Gothic body, as it were, the goth, as emerging from discussion or discourse with historical fashion and Victorian Gothic literature, like masking or veiling, memento mori. She makes this comparison of Gothic bodies to the spectral bodies of Gothic stories like ghosts, and how there's these qualities of the uncanny that they share. She talks about how goth is shaped by the narrative and images of the past, which continue to return, which is another theme of a lot of Gothic literature. You have like haunting, reincarnation, the reemergence of historic fashion. This phrase that she uses that I've used a lot is the appropriation and reappropriation of romanticized anachronistic ephemera, which basically is just a way to describe how goth fashion takes from a romanticized past and kind of plucks out the gothy stuff and uses it. So she makes that's an argument I actually generally agree with in her previous books. But once you take that a step further to try and, which she does in her next book, to try and understand goth culture through Gothic literature or through mainstream use of Gothic literature, then that's when you run into problems.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go off on a rant here, but if you what's your view in general on the terms Gothic and goth, because you can apply those to how, if you want to describe music, if you want to describe fashion, if you want to, do you call, culturally, like, is someone a goth or a Gothic? Is something goth or Gothic? Do you even care? Do you make any kind of distinction?
Well, I used to not care, but I guess I have to blame Amino for this and the internet. But suddenly, there was kind of a need to distinguish the two. because there's a lot of people coming in and they like, I don't know, horror movies, or they like Victorian stuff,
Right.
or something like that. They find Gothic architecture pretty. They only have that, and then they come on and they argue that they're a goth and complain that people don't accept them or stuff like that. So there became kind of a need to say that, oh, okay, so you're, I guess, gothically inclined or darkly inclined then. And I had to, like, boil it down to, like, a goth is a fan of goth rock or genres like that.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the term today comes from.
Mm-hmm.
And then now I basically find myself just saying, a goth is someone that listens to goth music. Okay, bye. Because it happens a lot.
That's a good way, like, for this specifically, I think that's a good way to, the quickest, easiest way to make an immediate distinction.
Exactly. And I did write a blog post once that I thought was a brief introduction to what goth is. And what I did there was I actually started with something that's technically irrelevant, and that was the goth tribe.
Mm.
So where the word itself came from, and then how that influenced Gothic architecture, and then the literature, and then movies and TV shows, and then the music, and then us.
Yeah.
So I tell people that, okay, if you look at this timeline or map or whatever, you could argue that they're connected, but at the same time, not really.
Yeah, I mean, because, the music did take influences from, there are songs and albums and art and lyrics based on Gothic literature.
Mm-hmm.
And the fashion took some inspiration from Victorian fashion, although but that's the thing, is it wasn't only that. There was, the kabuki fashion and all, punk and all kinds of different things. It was this big, so like the way I distinguish it, and this gets kind of into I'm not going to go like massively in depth with this because I did a YouTube series on it, but it's this notion of the homology, basically meaning that goth is what you get, the structural resonance between different pillars, different interaction of different elements. It's not just one thing. It's not, and it's meant to be understood through its own filter. So the cultural identity, those kind of pillars that I have tried to lay out, I've got 4 of them, and I might as well just list them because I wrote them down. The first one is an appreciation of or affinity for goth music. The second is a social or philosophical departure from media cultures, ideologies, and norms. The third is embracing darkness, and that can be manifest as the color black, as an aesthetic, an appreciation of the macabre, or through other creative and performative avenues. And then the fourth is an active pursuit of incorporating these values, material objects, and rituals into substantive communal interaction. So that's how I view goth. And the difference here, though, when you're talking about Gothic and goth, or viewing goth through the lens of the Gothic, is that I think we have, as a culture, our own kind of filter for what we use. Going back to what Catherine Spooner said, that the reappropriation of anachronistic ephemera, our own, I guess, philosophical filter. I used phenomenology as a framework for how I tried to explain it, but basically it's these 3 elements: the uncanny, romanticism, and otherness. And I think that's kind of what we take new stuff into goth through. It gets filtered through that and perverted and adapted, I guess. So that's my academic distinction. On the other hand, though, because we did talk about a couple episodes back how people have said, "Oh, the whole debate is just dumb anyway." I think that's a bit dismissive, but as a rhetorical, I don't know, tool or phrase, I don't care that much if someone uses Gothic and Goth interchangeably in most situations. Because especially if you're talking with someone inside the culture, we kind of know what we mean. But on the other hand, I still think that being specific in the way we use terminology is important to kind of convey the message we're trying to get across. I mean, it's really important in like philosophical discourse because they are really like care about you have to use the correct word the correct way so that we know what the fuck you're talking about, which I get. But in just like a casual cultural setting, I don't think it's that big of a deal. We have talked about before, and I don't know if you agree with this or not, but I think Mark actually makes the distinction between Gothic music and Goth music, whereas Goth music is what you would expect in that lineage of what came out of the 80s. And then Gothic music is a spectrum. So you could have Lacuna Coil or Evanescence or something and say it's Gothic music. But, people argue about that too, and they have their own takes on it.
I haven't really thought about that. What I usually see most is people trying to bring what is called Gothic metal. I don't even agree that stuff is Gothic metal, even, into Goth culture and saying that this is Goth music, so I'm a Goth.
Right. And that's metal. I mean,
usually what I see.
That's more like, I think even if you look within metal, they have their own genre groupings for those bands, like symphonic metal or...
Yeah, exactly. What I see that is called Gothic metal nowadays is things that I would either call symphonic metal or doom metal.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have some newer stuff from recent years that I don't even know, but that's usually what I think. So why is it called Gothic metal even? Is it because the pretty female vocalist has a pretty dress on? Is that why?
And that is frustrating. And I want to think that this comes from people outside of goth, but just the idea that, well, it has the word goth in it, so it's the same thing, is just it's just like so intellectually lazy. Like, think for 5 seconds about what you just said, and you'll figure out why that's a terrible reason for anything.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I think that, I mean, I get why someone might be frustrated and say, Gothic versus goth, like, who cares? Just live your life and do your thing. But I do think it still has some impact, especially for people that are new and just trying to figure out what everything means. Because you kind of have to, when you first start, you have to figure out, like, well, what is this and what is that and how does this fit with that and what are, so I don't think it's totally irrelevant.
Yeah, because I agree with everything you said just a minute ago. But it's really sad that you have to kind of boil it down a lot to, for example, just saying that, it's just the music, to make people understand. Yeah. Because there's so much more.
Yeah, and that is a good shorthand too. Like, I mean, and that, because that can open a discussion, because from that point you can say, well, the music, like we were saying, did take inspiration from these things, and it also took inspiration from these other things, and it had philosophical influences, and the fashion and the music kind of came out together. But it is a good heuristic, like a quick way to distinguish those things. The problem is that you get on the other end of it where people will say goth is only music and that's it. And that's frustrating too. But
yeah, because I hope that that's not what people think I'm saying.
Right.
It's just that there's too much, and
Yeah.
these people are entirely new. You know, they think Evanescence or Marilyn Manson or... Okay, the worst things I've heard on Amino. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Green Day.
Oh, no.
Green
No,
Day.
no.
Avril Lavigne. The Pretty Reckless. And get ready for this. Shakira.
No, come on.
Yes.
Nobody said that.
Yes! Because she had a wolf song, and
Oh
that
my
made
God.
her gothic. Yep. I
What am I doing? I'm shutting down the show. This is... we've clearly failed in our mission. It's over.
Yeah, I don't even remember what I said, because I think I was just completely baffled.
Like,
they were
we have
completely
deeper
serious.
problems here than just
Yeah,
you saying
so
Shakira's.
we need to start with, okay, it's not fucking Shakira, or that new Taylor Swift song where she's apparently wearing some dark
Oh, no.
lipstick in her music video.
Ooh, so spooky.
And she's killing another ex. Yeah, so
Yep,
goth.
because goth is violent.
Yep. So, yeah, it's pretty sad that that's all I can say to these kids.
Yeah.
Because I don't have time. I sometimes send them, like, big blog posts where I just sit down and write a lot. Because that's usually where my blog posts come from. Like, the big informational ones.
Like,
It's
I
like,
just
okay,
can't.
I'm sick of this shit now. Let me just write this down so I can just link it to every single person who
Yeah,
asks me
exactly.
this every day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So moving on, the unseen metaphysical world became a great source of inspiration. Today, the modern equivalent is the transparency of a digital world. Hardly a corner hasn't had a light shown on it. Mystique, ever more elusive, can be conjured in the way we dress. Try a turn in one of Australian label Daisy's, but let's come back to fashion. Boudoir Anglaise baby doll dresses. They're almost sweet, except they're micro short and nipped in all the right places. Okay, so...
I want to see that now.
That the fashion part aside, what's your kind of take on the idea that because everything is so connected now and we have everybody has a smartphone, that there's no more mystery and no more the magic and the shadowed corners of goth have kind of disappeared. What's your take on that?
I actually don't think that has done much, really. We still do have local scenes everywhere in the world, and, well, I haven't experienced that much except for Vegete, but there's still amazingness, and that feeling that I get from goth, especially the music and dancing and just being around so many cool people in the club. I guess that's kind of that feeling of mystique or alluringness or whatever. We still have that. And for some reason, I've seen that people, even though they've grown up with a smartphone in their hand and access to any information in the world available in 3 seconds, they don't take advantage of it. And that's really weird.
Or sometimes I see that there's just so much that the important information kind of gets lost in the noise, because there's just a flood of information, so it's hard to it becomes hard again to find what you want because there's just everything.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I haven't Googled goth. I haven't needed to.
Oh no, that'd probably be terrible if we did. I'd probably be disappointed.
Let me try. Goth.
But, yeah, tell me what you get. Probably Wikipedia.
Wikipedia, whatisgoth.com, Urban Dictionary.
I'm concerned about whatisgoth.com. I don't know what that is.
I'm not sure if
I don't have high hopes, though.
Okay, so we got WikiHow, How to Be Goth.
Oh, good.
BBC's How Are Goths and Emos Defined?
Okay. That might be better.
Oh, God. Doll's Kill.
Oh, no.
I was on their site recently, and I was just blasted with yellow. So I don't understand why I've heard this is a popular brand.
I have bigger problems with them because, I mean, other than being overpriced and being one of those brands that like take advantage of just selling stuff to subcultures, they put out a hoodie. It was like $150 black hoodie with small white print that said "Goth is white."
Oh.
So I'm not a fan of theirs.
Oh, God. And one happy thing at the end of the page. The recent postpunk.com's The Beautiful Men of Goth and Postpunk.
Okay, well, there you go. That's a good site.
Yay!
Yeah, I agree with you, though. I think like the mystery and the arcane and the esoteric is not so much a function of what is accessible, but it's more it's constructed. So you mentioned like you feel that when you go to a club. I think that's what we do, is when we either get together or in our private like ritual, whether that's getting dressed for the club or like listening to music and sewing or something like that. Mm-hmm. It's something that we create in the spaces that we're in rather than something that exists outside of us necessarily.
Yeah.
So I think we all have the ability to do that.
Yeah, and I kind of thought about that. I've worked at Disney World, and there I learned that there's no Disney magic. I create it. So it was like my job to create Disney magic. So, you know, Disney was ruined for me. Because the magic doesn't exist.
You go in the back room and Mickey Mouse and Pluto are like butt fucking or something. Hey, Link.
I've undressed princesses and heard that my coworkers was like, yeah, I banged Cinderella last night.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
Hey, buddy. I'm almost done, okay?
I go to a different wellness.
Okay.
But the web was a little bit hard, so I need help.
Well, I can't help you right now.
Yes, sure.
The only thing I can do is if you want me to put your other game in, I can switch to the other game.
Fine.
All right. So I'm going to jump to the last couple paragraphs here. Oh, that's my album review. I went too far. Okay. All right, so I skipped a couple parts. We'll go to, and others are following suit, recognizing the power and acknowledging our darker side. I'm out of breath from running up and down the stairs.
God.
That's how out of shape I am.
Oh, and the polar bear had a question.
Yeah. If he wants to send dick pics, my phone number is 6.
Oh my God. He wants you to send dick pics, by the way. He just wondered if Link has ever played Link.
He played Breath of the Wild with my wife when that came out.
Anna spilt Breath of the Wild.
Okay. Yeah.
Just a random question.
Yeah. As are you guys both gamers or is he a gamer?
No, just him.
Okay.
I'm one of those that completely freak out and get really angry. So
just like my wife. I've been trying to get her into Dark Souls because I think she would really like it. But
that's Seaman's favorite game.
Oh man, why isn't he on the podcast? Let's get him over here. No, she's like playing easier games. She will start breaking stuff in the house. I have to like go to your room and calm down for.
Yeah, I can't even play fucking phone app games. I get mad. So I tried to play Vampire the Masquerade for a while, but then there was too much fighting, and then I just had to yell at him to finish the fight for me.
That game's not even that hard. All right. Okay. I won't slag you off too much. Sorry. All right. Where was it? What were we talking? We're talking about sex, sexuality, and undercurrent that has charged the collections of Demna with fetishist spandex and thigh-high boots is brought out of the previously dimly lit boudoir and into the open. One only has to look at Bella Hadid's Met Gala catsuit and fashion's current taste for harnesses over dresses to see the inflections. London-based label Fanny, I'm just going to leave it at Fanny, has made it its stock in trade to produce delicate body chains and metal mesh bras to layer over clothes. All right, so I have an issue with how much they're reading into what the fashion means, but I'm going to get to that in a second. But before I get to that, I'm interested to know what your opinion is on whether or not, because this is what they're doing here, whether or not goth has something to say about sexuality.
No.
Okay.
No. I've actually written an article on my blog about this whole does goth equal fetishists, kinky
Right.
BDSM people. Well, I'm not the right person to say that no, because I'm kind of part of that.
Yeah.
Actually, at Vegete, I'm they call it a walking act at the fetish party, so I basically just walk around,
spank naughty boys.
I do that too.
Yeah.
Give people condoms and candy shaped like genitals, dance on stage. So I get the festival ticket for free.
I need some of this genital candy.
It's delicious.
Yeah, I generally agree because so, I mean, other than, I think the most you could extrapolate would be a message of acceptance of different lifestyles. But I think obviously Goth and BDSM community are distinct, and that community would have a lot more to say within their culture on it. I think Goth is more about, if anything, is about like queering gender and aesthetic. But not so much sex. So, I mean, you'll meet, there are, like you said, you're into the BDSM community, but you have goths that are specifically monogamous. You have goths that are poly, goths that are asexual, all and so on and so on, pretty much anything you can imagine.
Yeah. And,
I've done, on the podcast, we've done a number of episodes around both BDSM, sexual orientation, sex in general. And I've read a lot of the academic literature that's tried to pin down like, okay, what is the value, what is more valued within goth culture? And really what I've seen is just a whole range of conclusions that just kind of try to justify whatever, like any specific opinion, which I think kind of points to that goth is basically pretty varied. So if you try to pin down one thing, you're just going to be finding the group of people that are into that and ignoring the others. But I do think that to a large degree, goth rejects like heteronormative expectations, so, like in the way that we dress, the kind of behaviors that you would find in more conservative cultures that have that kind of patriarchal bent to it. I think we reject that kind of thing, and have more of a venerate the feminine and the androgynous presentations. And actually I said queering. I use that word in a non-sexual sense. It's basically just to mean that it's like our rituals and our clothing and behaviors are used in non-normative ways. So for example, if you go to a goth club, everybody's dancing alone, and it's kind of an introspective activity, which is in a way a queering of traditional club dance.
I haven't really thought of that. Yeah. We dance alone. Nobody at goth clubs dances with each other.
Yeah, and a lot of times people will have their eyes closed or they're creating their own. Everybody gives each other their own space.
Yeah,
and it's
that's
very
kind
much
of amazing. With all the flailing and the stomping and shit. How do we not bump into each other? I close my eyes too sometimes and I just feel the music and that's kind of interesting how we do that.
I have a friend actually who Leah Bush is a friend of mine. She she's an academic who's done a thesis and a few papers on, I don't think she's published them, but on this kind of issue. She actually uses the term gothing rather than queering, which I quite like, because it kind of implies kind of what I was going back to earlier about having our own kind of philosophical lens, that it implies that these non-normative behaviors or cultural activities are not like in response to mainstream culture, but just a result of our own system of interaction and like deviance and that kind of thing. So I kind of am gonna try and use the word gothing more often because I quite like that.
Yeah.
All right, so let's finish this article off. The prevalence of bodysuits under jeans, leather as daywear, and miniskirts are also part of this. Women are empowered, not objectified, says Sack. It's the new wave of femininity, says Buscema. To go dark, whether it is through symbolism, a latticed black fabric, or an emphasis on the body, is to acknowledge the shades of light and dark in the world. Quote, to me, it's a profound unspoken language that communicates to the world you are insightful and fearless, says Abrams. Who sees skulls not as a marker of death, but a memo to live well. It is memento mori, a reminder that we are all created equal. Having respect for this gives the wearer of a skull an edge of confidence. It's unapologetic and says to the world, seize the day, enjoy life, have no regrets. What could be more bright than that? So here's so I mean, in general, I agree with that argument. I mean, I've made that argument before, that the element of morbidity within goth isn't a fixation on death, but this kind of memento mori that you know what she said. It's a reminder that we're all equal in death, and to enjoy and appreciate what you have now and that kind of thing. But my problem is, she says that that's the skulls that you wear give you that reminder. And you can tell me what you think about this, but I think once that concept leaves the runway and becomes absorbed into the broader fashion lexicon, that people aren't wearing a skull print because it reminds them of their inevitable mortality and respect for their loved ones.
No.
It's just like, ooh, a spooky skull.
Yeah, exactly. I do that.
Yeah.
Not that I really buy like t-shirts with skulls on them, really. Maybe 10 years ago.
It's a bit blasé for goth culture.
Yeah.
But I do think, but that's the thing, is I think for goths, at least the goths that are gothing correctly, it is, there is that element of it, whether that's cultural or whether that's through the way you dress or the things you do, that kind of thing. That's there. It may not be you may not get dressed for work in the morning and put on a skull and be like, yes, let me spend time pontificating on the philosophical significance of, but that's still like there in the background kind of thing. Whereas I think for when this stuff is coming off the runway, it's just, this is the trend for the season.
Yeah.
So I think these runway folks are just kind of wanking themselves off.
Yeah.
Twiddling with their winkies, as it were.
Album review.
This month we are reviewing the album Milieu. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it or not, but it's the newest album from the post-punk Texas artist Annex. Here's their description of the album: hypnotic psychedelics that captivate the mind, body, and soul. Dreamlike visions are now a reality, and all patterns of the dark shadows are within our inner dimensions. Release the energy inside of you. Fall into the new light of Mel U. So before we get into our review, I'm going to go ahead and play a track from the album, and I'm going to be playing a track called New Light. All right. Well, why don't you start with your review? Because I'm familiar with Annex,
Okay.
so I'd be interested to hear what you thought I think you're a new listener, right? This is the first
Yeah,
time.
yeah, I've never
Okay.
heard of them before. Okay, so let me see here. Okay. Let me see. First song, 500 años.
That was pretty good.
Yeah. Let me see. The notes just say instrumental intro. I got an instant post-punk feeling with the bass.
Yeah.
Really fun twinkly guitar. Nice crisp and clean sounding drums. I really like the combination of the kind of tribal drums with the hi-hat.
Mm-hmm.
Nice ambiance overall. And that kind of feeling continues on into the next song, Modern Age. And this is where we hear the vocals for the first time, really punky female vocals. Very upbeat, kind of makes you want to jump and dance. Then we have Red Tide. I love the atmosphere on that one. Really good beat.
Yeah.
Not bad lyrics, parts in Spanish though. It was pretty cool. Yeah. Let me see. And then Mal Futuro. And
You were great at this. I'm so bad at pronouncing other languages.
I kind of laugh every time you try to.
Well,
For example,
I laugh at myself.
Blutengel.
Blutengel. Well, see, I'm American, and our language is actually the correct way to say anything. So actually, they're wrong. Their language is wrong.
Okay. Mal Futuro. I almost got kind of a rock and roll or metal feeling from that one. I don't know, but yeah.
Yeah.
The lyrics in this one are completely in Spanish, but they're very simple, so they kind of remind me of black metal lyrics. I love black metal though, so I just don't give a shit about the lyrics.
Black are my socks, black is my curtains, black is my soul. I'm so goth. It's 2000 and I'm a mall goth. Blutengel's cool. Yeah, that's how that song goes.
Totally. Yeah, but the instrumental part is, very gothy, post-punky. New Light. I love the instrumentals in that one. I like the lyrics, but kind of like in the last song, the lyrics keep repeating throughout the song, so it kind of got a little boring for me.
I so rarely get into lyrics these days because there's so much music to listen to that I'm constantly going through new stuff. That is pretty rare for me because I used to, that was it. I'd get a new album, I'd listen to it a million times on the CD, I'd memorize everything, look through the jewel case and look at all the lyrics and all that stuff. And now it's like listen to an album a few times on Spotify and then move on to something else.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate. I still try to. The vinyl that I have, I do listen to quite often.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm mostly a CD person, so I try to buy everything that I like.
Not so much digital? I
grew up with CDs, so that's kind of like, for me, that's the way to listen to music.
Okay.
But
interesting.
I usually listen through iTunes and on my iPod, and I even have a Discman that I use sometimes.
Oh, wow.
So I'm so old school, and I'm just 23.
I grew up with cassette tapes, so I had a Walkman with, cassette tape player and everything, and then switched over to CDs and...
Yeah, I was slightly too young for that. Like, I remember it, but yeah.
Cool. Any more thoughts on the album?
Let me see. Title track, Milieu.
Yeah.
Was it? I don't know.
I think so.
That was a short instrumental one.
Yeah. I like that though. I like that they had. It kind of reminded me of Bauhaus, that song. But yeah.
Yeah, I didn't think of that, but it was very atmospheric, so it was pretty cool. Then we have Transient. Again, great instrumentals, but by this time, I have to admit, I'm starting to get a little tired of the vocals. They sound kind of the same throughout, at least so far in the album I wrote. I'm not much of a fan of punk, mainly because of those types of vocals, so
yeah, you wouldn't
might be just me.
Yeah.
So, kind of the same with the short lyrics that keeps on repeating.
Yeah.
And then I wrote, and that sound at the end kind of hurts my ears. I don't remember, but I think there was a really loud song, and I had my headphones on. El Maniquí, pretty good instrumentals, lyrics in Spanish again, and the lyrics in that one really, really good. Covens, I thought the guitars on that one were really lovely, but the rest was a little meh. I guess I was kind of like, okay, I felt, mostly because of the vocals and lyrics, I was kind of close to the end there. The title of the next one, what language is this? Because I thought it was Swedish at first.
I just assumed it was
German.
Spanish.
But
you're right, it does have a different, it's got that thing over the O.
I forgot what it's called
No,
in
it's not
English.
umlaut. It's not. I don't know.
I don't know what it is in English, but so I think it would be pronounced Ströb or Ströb, something like that. Spooky atmosphere in that one, and I really love the guitars towards the end.
Yeah.
Then last song, Las Cruces. Completely okay song, I guess. Pretty simple lyrics. And the album ends with a heartbeat. Yeah, wrote that. So
yeah. I remember that because it started getting faster, and I'm like, now I'm feeling anxious. What's happening?
So my overall thoughts, I really love the instrumentals on the album, but it's not like super amazing or groundbreaking or anything. The vocal style, not really my taste. Became a little too much for me while listening to the whole thing. The album was like 45 minutes or something.
Yeah.
So for those 45 minutes, it got a little repetitive for me, but I don't think it's necessarily a bad album. So I think I'd give it 3 stars.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
So for me, and to what you said, I'm gonna, I'll talk about my opinions on it. But it is certainly while you could classify it as post-punk, it definitely leans towards the punk side.
Yeah.
Which I really enjoy. So, but on the other hand, if you're not into punk so much, it will get repetitive. It will be, especially if you're listening through the album, it will be too much.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. For me, though, I really found this to be a climax for their catalog. I love how the band has, over the last few albums, experimented with going back and forth with harsher punk sounds, even more so than this album, to much softer, more gothy sounds. And for me, I think this album struck the right balance for the band. Like I said, I thought Milieu, the eponymous track Milieu, as music reviewers would say, to me had a lot of Bauhaus vibes, and I really enjoyed that. You have songs like El Maniquí, that I felt like incorporated some gothabilly elements, which I also enjoy. Malfuturo was leaned more towards the punk and horror punk side of things. Even though the album description said it was psychedelic and dreamlike, I didn't really get that so much on the album.
No, me neither.
Maybe the last track, but even there it was kind of buried. I'd actually would like to hear songs more in that vein from them. I think more melodic and psychedelic songs would be pretty cool to hear their take on, which maybe this was their take on it and it just wasn't there enough. But for me, that would just be kind of like a cherry on the cake. I think Nicole had a great vocal performance. Personally, I really like her vocals. And I actually kind of wished she was a little louder or brighter in the mix, because she's kind of there's a lot of reverb and she's in the back of the mix. But it wasn't too big of a deal. I thought it worked pretty well. My favorite track was probably Straub, as I would say as a stupid American. Because to me, especially in the beginning, it had kind of an alien sex fiend vibe to it, with the like syncopated drums and some wacky guitar noises. That's the technical term for that, because I'm a professional musician. No, I'm not. And then it had like a heavy bass guitar driven melody to it as well. And so that was definitely my favorite track. Overall, though, I loved this album. I've listened to it a bunch of times. I thought it was really well mixed and composed, and they executed it well. So I'm actually going to give it a 4.5 out of 5. Definitely recommend you guys check it out. If you enjoyed the track we played, New Light, that will give you a idea of what the rest of the album is like. It's not one of those where they change genres every few songs. So if that was your thing, you're really going to enjoy it. And I'll have a link to the Bandcamp along with all our other links in the show notes. So if you're on your phone's podcast app, just swipe left or right and you will have links and a list there. Hey. Just turn the volume up on the remote. Okay. All right, give me one more second. I'll be right back.
So you've got to be interested in death. It's the last great taboo. It's the only taboo left.
Precisely. I mean, why is it, do you think, that everyone in here is dressed in black? It's a celebration of death.
No, I just like the clothes.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, the clothes look good. Yeah, I mean, death looks good. Charles Manson, yeah? No, he was cool.
Don't know if I mentioned it before, but I'm actually a vampire.
Sinister Suggestions.
Okay, so I think my sinister suggestion would be Dark Shadows. And don't run away screaming, I mean the actual show. Because I know a lot of people only know the Tim Burton movie, and a lot of people didn't like it.
Nope.
I did like it, though. So I decided a few months ago to check out the actual TV show it was based on. And it's from the late or mid-60s until the beginning of the 70s. And it's like 1,250 episodes. So it's you gotta have dedication to watch this. But it's really fun if you like the Gothic. Because it's super dramatic, and you got every supernatural creature and element you can think of.
Yep.
And it's really fun to have in the background when you're doing some DIY, stuff like that. The episodes are about 20 minutes long. And you can find most of them.
Sorry. I was going to say that's a good point because it's kind of like a soap opera. So it is one of those where you can have it in the background and not have to catch every single thing that's going on.
Yeah, because the storylines are very slow. So if you are at a storyline you don't really like, it takes a lot of time to get out of it, which I am at right now. I'm at episode 600.
Jesus Christ. You started a couple months ago?
Yep.
Oh my God.
And I'm at this Frankenstein's monster storyline. And it's getting kind of tiring, but I'm trying to power through it by sewing in the background. So yeah, really recommend checking it out. It's a classic. It is technically a soap opera, but it's probably the most Gothic show there is out there, next to Penny Dreadful or something.
Sure.
So if you like that, definitely check that out.
Yeah, it was a forerunner. I'm trying to remember when all the Universal monster stuff started to come out. I thought that was the 70s, but it might have been the 60s as well. The 70s were the Hammer horror, right?
Yeah, Dracula was 31.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay. I was way off. All right.
Yeah.
My only memory of, and this is kind of, it's not embarrassing. It's kind of stupid. My only memory of Dark Shadows is watching 4 or 5 episodes. I was spending the night at a friend's house, and my wife, then girlfriend, was asleep in the room upstairs. I was in the living room with my not youth pastor, but church mentor. This was a long time ago. And it was like 2 a.m, and I just wanted to go upstairs and have sex with my girlfriend, but that was sinful. And I think he knew what I wanted to do, so he would not go to sleep because he was laying on the other couch.
Oh my God.
And I was like, yeah, I think I'm going to go upstairs now. And he's like, are you sure you want to do that? And I remember just being ashamed and then eventually having sex and then feeling like, oh no, I've sinned. I'm so terrible. And that's my only memory of that show. Like, I don't know, 16 years ago or something. I don't remember how long it was. Catholic guilt. I'm not even Catholic, but same thing. I guess my sinister suggestion is I'm just doing this on the fly now because I'm really good at preparing for the show and I completely forgot about it. But I'm going to recommend the YouTube channel. I want to make sure I get this right. Universal Pagan Temple. A lot of people, I got a lot of replies from a previous pagan suggestion saying that the book I recommended was trash and giving me other I'm like, yes, I have also been reading Cunningham and all the other, typically recommended pagan authors. So I'll give this recommendation and see if people tell me this is trash also. But I think it's great. It's a YouTube channel. They've been making videos for a long time. It's two people, and they do a lot of they film a lot of ritual stuff, and then they also have some more educational videos. And recently, they just started doing video game playthroughs with the tact they're taking is to play through a video game that has pagan influences and then talk about it, which is interesting because I have found now that I've been doing rituals and things for several months that I'm playing video games or watching films or reading books and things like that and noticing all of these pagan influences and at least references that I never even realized were a thing before, which is pretty neat because there's this kind of history that I wasn't aware of that has been there all this time. So discovering that thing's kind of cool. They're doing video game playthroughs for that. But there's also just a lot of good resources on there if you're interested in learning more about Wicca and paganism. So that's my recommendation. Caroline, thank you so much for hanging out. This was very much a treat. I hope you're not too drunk. But thanks for taking time to come on and hang out and talk, shoot the shit for a while.
Of course, it's such an honor.
Where, remind us again where we can find your blog. CarolineSometimes.blogspot.com, I guess. Regional URL extension.
Yeah, whatever works for you. And then pretty much everywhere else, I'm Caroline Carnivorous, so definitely on Instagram, on Amino. If you're gonna join Gothic or trad Goth Amino, just type in Cemetery Confessions and we'll accept you because you're cool if you listen to this podcast.
Unlike the host of the podcast, you, the listener, are actually cool. So awesome. Thanks again. This was really fun. Hopefully we can have you on at some point in the future.
Yeah, that'd
but
be
not
really great.
Not when it's 9 a.m. my time. Let's not do that again.
Okay, fine.
Too much. I've got a sneak peek for you. This month's Patreon live stream is going to be quite a treat. You may remember at one point during the Death of Goth episode, Trey mentioned something about how EBM had a close relationship with trance and industrial. Now, friend of the show and friend of mine, Andy Harriman, author of Somewhere Leather, Somewhere Lace, among several other people, took issue with Trey's statement. So long story short, both of them have agreed to come on a special Patreon live stream and debate the history of EBM and industrial. I'm really excited about this. It's going to be a clash of titans, and I'm quite honored to be able to moderate the debate. If you're interested in tuning in or listening to the audio after it's been posted, head over to patreon.com/cemeteryconfessions and hop on at the Crow's Call level. Of course, you don't have to support us financially to support the show. I understand everyone has a different financial situation. If you don't have $1 a month, absolutely please take care of yourself first. I would greatly appreciate it if you were able to share the show with a friend. That's another wonderful way to help us. So as always, I would like to take a moment to thank our Patreon supporters, because without them, we would not exist. So Patreon supporters for March are as follows. At the founders level, we have Steven, SJ, Esmeralda, Abigail, and Matt. At the Nocturnal Council level, we have Kyra, Jason, Natalie, Michelle, Azzy, Skullgirdle of YouTube fame, Thomas, Trey, Nephilim and Corruptus, also on YouTube, Angela, Ivy, Skiamakos, Kay of Goth.life, and Heather. At the Crow's Call level, we have Isabel, Rabin of rabinphoto.com, Sarah, Christina, Esther, Ambergeddon, Such Horrors, Dolly Dagger, Paula, DJ Atac, Becca, Kelly, Isidore, Dom, Lady Joy Division, Elizabeth, Vokun, Marco, Stewart, Isabel, Christian, Marissa, Fifth Dream, Alex Kennedy of the We Have a Technical podcast, Shelley, Jokester, Caroline Carnivorous, Rose, Eternal Winter, also on YouTube, Bronwyn, Angel, Saren, Anne, Heather, Honora, who you can find over on Gothic Amino, Laurel, Jen, Joseph, Beth, Lennon, Lyrillith, and Dinah. Those are the supporters for March. As I mentioned, we recently hit a Patreon goal, which means starting now, this month, I will be giving away a special care package of exclusive Cemetery Confessions merch every other month. And it's not just going to be shirts and mugs and those kinds of things. I'm going to be handwriting a letter and collecting some goth goodies from around my house to ship to you as well. Since I'm recording this a few days before the end of the month, I can't announce the winner yet. However, everyone on the Patreon page from $1 and up is going to be entered into the raffle. So the winner will be announced on the Patreon page, of course. But if you'd like to have a chance to win the next time around, head over to patreon.com/cemeteryconfessions. Next week, we're going to be back with Kai Decadence of YouTube and Forrest, previously on the birthday episode, a friend of mine from the local scene, to talk about video games. We're going to be discussing what the crossover between gaming culture and goth culture is, how those identities and values share spheres of influence and also depart from each other in a number of ways. And we're going to be covering 3 games that specifically have had not just a gothic element to them, but have impacted goth culture in some way. Those games are going to be Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, Bloodborne, and Alice the Madness Returns. So I hope you'll come back in a couple weeks to hang out with us and talk about some games. Unfortunately, we don't have time this week for listener feedback. I was going to cover some of the feedback we've gotten from the Christian Goth episode, because I've gotten a whole range of emails and comments and things that continue to come in. Some of them very positive, some people sharing their experiences with either the groups we were involved with or groups that we had nothing to do with. Interestingly, has kind of become a Alcoholics Anonymous, as it were, kind of a recovery companion, swapping stories about how we got through and were raised in that kind of culture, and how it's changed us over time, and how we've learned and grown from there. And I've also gotten some interesting and quite caustic feedback from people within the Christian Goth community. So I'm actually going to save that for the Patreon live stream, where I'll have some more time to go over that. But please continue to send your emails, messages, and comments, whether that's on YouTube or through the cemeteryconfessions@gmail.com email. I always love to hear from you. That's all for this week. I hope to see you on the next episode. But until then, stay dark.
The preceding program is a member of The Belfry, a network of blogs, podcasts, and videos for the darkly inclined. Go to thebelfry.rip for more information.